And as part of our Salute the Champions, we are just ecstatic, particularly in this area of Wake County, where we identify an individual who has achieved to a significant level, and more importantly, have encouraged others to do the same. We're happy to welcome here, 2019 Salute the Champion recipient, Jessica Holmes. Welcome to Sports Shop. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, just let people know, Jessica is the chair of the board for Wake County Commissioners, and I'm told that she's broken a couple of records, K-Mac.
Yes.
Not only at her age, she's the youngest commissioner in Wake County, and more important, the youngest female and African-American female in Wake County. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm the youngest person to ever be elected to the Board of Commissioners. And then separately from that, I'm the youngest person to ever chair the board.
Chair the board. That it is right there. Unbelievable.
Outstanding. One of the questions, we'll jump right in. One of the questions that I had just right off, just looking at it, seeing that you're the youngest person, that's probably not something people you graduate college, say, hey, I want to be on the Board of Commissioners, right? Talk to me about how this came about and how, what inspired you to really want to be in this type of position and how fulfilling it may be for you.
Well, that's an excellent question. For starters, I'm an education law attorney. So I went to undergrad at Chapel Hill, law school at Chapel Hill. And so I've always been an advocate. That's always what I wanted to be. The reason I became an attorney was so that I could be an advocate for people that grew up like I did. In rural Eastern North Carolina, I'm a student that grew up on free and reduced price lunch. At different points in my life, experienced homelessness with my family. So I always wanted to be an advocate for people that were underserved. And so as an education law attorney, I was always, advocating and marching and at the General Assembly and participating in things like Moral Monday. And I was told that, don't you think it's about time for you to come inside and sit at the board table versus being outside with a bullhorn and my protest documents and protest poster boards. And, I was asked to come inside and sit at the table.
Wow.
And I decided that it's about time that someone who looks like me, someone who comes from my background, sat at the table and was making decisions for our greater community. Because when I looked at the board in 2014, there wasn't anyone that looked like me.
Right.
Wow. We're talking to the chair of the Wake County Commissioners, Jessica Holmes, and you said something that just threw me off with the homeless thing you just talked about. And it's amazing talking to a lot of recipients when they share their stories. People understand that, they understand the story, the glory, but they understand the story that you're going through. Why? What is your vision for Wake County in terms of what kind of impact that you want to make personally in your particular position?
I very much use my personal testimony, and I call it the testimony. You mentioned people don't know the story.
Right.
I always like to think, one of my favorite songs and say that, people don't know the cost of the oil in my alabaster box. And, I use my personal testimony to guide my platform. So when I got elected, one of the first things that I tackled was school funding. Because it was educators that told me I could go to college because I came from a background where my mother had dropped out of high school. And I also have focused heavily on issues like affordable housing. And I chaired and created Wake County's first ever affordable housing task force, which resulted in a new allocation of about $15 million a year towards affordable housing. We've invested funds in creating a women's shelter. We've worked on addressing childhood hunger by putting food pantries in particularly middle schools and high schools, because if anyone's ever heard of Backpack Buddies, it's a great program for elementary school children, but it's more difficult to get middle schoolers and high schoolers to accept a backpack full of food because, they don't want their peers to know.
Right.
And I experienced what that felt like to go through the cafeteria line and not want to give up your free and reduced price lunch number because you didn't want your classmates to know. So my personal testimony truly guides my political platform.
Wow.
One of the questions I had, we're talking with Jessica Holmes, who's chair of the Wake County Commissioners, as one of our 2019 Salute the Champions. One of the questions I had was, understanding that, in school at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and you got your law degree, you standing up, for all of the causes. But once you got in and once you sit at the table and once you got the gavel, is there one thing that you probably thought you knew everything about or you assumed from the outside, but once you sat in that chair, you realize this is much different than I ever thought?
That is absolutely the case because, I had all of the sort of book expertise. I had the community experience in working with the people. But what I didn't necessarily anticipate were the just politics of it and how the reality that politics, almost regardless of party, can be messy. So when I started talking to people about affordable housing, they were like, shh. Do you really have to keep talking about all of the bad things that are happening in Wake County? So when I was talking about affordable housing and the fact that we have a problem with upward mobility and that, our jails are filled with people, the number one mental health facility in Wake County is our jail.
Wow.
And so when I started talking about these things, they were like, well, can't you just talk about the expansion at Lenovo? Can't you just talk about all of these development, economic development
Wi-Fi
opportunities?
At the library now.
Yeah. Good story. Good story.
Why do you always have to be the one in the room bringing up these things and lifting up the rug? And that became difficult because I had to be in a situation where I came here to speak my truth, and some of the same mentors and leaders that encouraged my fire we're now saying, can't you dim it just a little bit?
Just a little bit, huh?
Okay.